For 3,000 years they ruled Egypt. Black pharaohs with armies that made empires tremble. Then Hollywood cast Elizabeth Taylor. Then textbooks called them Nubian, a code word to hide the truth. The greatest African civilization was whitewashed, literally. Right now, at this very moment, your children are being taught that ancient Egypt was built by Mediterranean people, that the pharaohs looked like Europeans, that Africa contributed nothing to human civilization. Every single word of that is a calculated lie. And today, that lie dies. Because there was a kingdom, a black African kingdom that didn't just exist alongside Egypt. It conquered Egypt, ruled it for a century, built more pyramids than Egypt itself, defeated the most powerful military empire of the ancient world, and saved Jerusalem from genocide. It's in the Bible. 2 Kings chapter 19 verse 9. Isaiah chapter 37 verse 9. A black king, saving God's chosen people. While your textbooks pretend he never existed, the Kingdom of Kush, the 25th dynasty, the black pharaohs who made Egypt tremble, who made Assyria retreat. This is the story they erased from every textbook, every documentary, every museum. This is your stolen inheritance. And after this video, you'll never see ancient history the same way again. You'll never see yourself the same way again. By the end of this video, you'll discover truths that will shatter everything you thought you knew. How black African kings ruled Egypt for nearly a century, and why every Hollywood movie erased them. Why the Kingdom of Kush built more pyramids than Egypt, but vanished from history books. How European archaeologists admitted finding black pharaohs, then spent 200 years covering it up. And you'll understand why this isn't ancient history. This affects your life today, right now. This is why they teach you ancient Egypt started civilization, but never mention Kush started Egypt. This is why your children see Cleopatra played by white actresses, but never see Pharaoh Taharqa in any movie. This is why the wealth gap exists. This is why they owe you reparations. This is systemic erasure, and it's been happening for 2,700 years. If your ancestors came from West Africa, Central Africa, East Africa, this is your bloodline. The pharaohs they erased looked like you. The empire they buried was built by people who look like your family. You are not descended from slaves. You are descended from pharaohs, and it's time you knew their names. Picture the year 760 before Christ. The Mediterranean world is in chaos. Egypt, the superpower that dominated human civilization for 2,000 years, is fracturing. Libyan warlords control the northern cities. Local princes fight over scraps of territory. The great temples of Amun lie neglected, looted, defiled. The priests of Thebes, keepers of Egypt's ancient faith, watch their nation collapse into barbarism. And they look south, to Kush. Kush sits along the Nile in what we now call Sudan. But don't let modern borders fool you. This isn't some backwater. This is a civilization that's been building cities since 2500 before Christ. While Europe is still figuring out agriculture, Kush is trading gold with Arabia, iron with India, ivory with Phoenicia. The capital city of Napata rises along the Nile with stone temples that rival anything in Egypt. The royal pyramids at El Kuru stand sharp against the desert sky. These people aren't primitive. They're not tribal. They're not savages, no matter what your textbooks implied. They have their own writing system, their own architectural style, their own gods, though they also worship the Egyptian god Amun, because 500 years earlier, Egypt conquered Kush, and the Kushites absorbed Egyptian religion. But they didn't become Egyptian. They became something more powerful. They perfected what Egypt taught them. And now Egypt's priests are begging them to come save Egyptian civilization itself. King Kashta sits on the throne of Kush in 760 BC. His name means the Kushite. He's watching Egypt tear itself apart, and he sees an opportunity. Not conquest for conquest's sake, liberation, restoration. The priests of Amun are calling this a holy mission. Egypt's religion is being corrupted, the temples are being defiled, true worship has been abandoned. Kush, they say, must restore Ma'at. So Kashta marches north, not with fire and blood, though his armies could deliver both. With faith, with legitimacy, with the support of Egypt's religious establishment. He takes Thebes without a battle. The priests welcome him as a liberator. His daughter Amenirdes I is installed as God's wife of Amun. This isn't just a religious title. In Thebes, the God's wife of Amun holds power equal to the pharaoh himself. Kashta's daughter now controls southern Egypt's wealth, its temples, its spiritual authority. Think about what this means. A black African king just took control of Egypt's religious capital, not through violence, through legitimacy. Because the Egyptians themselves recognized that Kush understood Ma'at better than Egypt's own rulers did. The student had surpassed the teacher, and Egypt knew it. But Kashta dies before he can complete the conquest. His son takes the throne. His name is Piye, and Piye doesn't just want southern Egypt. He wants it all. 747 before Christ. Piye is in his palace at Napata when word arrives. The Libyan warlords in northern Egypt are making alliances. They're threatening Thebes. Piye doesn't hesitate. He mobilizes the Kushite army and marches north. What happens next gets recorded on a massive stone slab called the Victory Stele of Piye. It stands in the Cairo Museum today, covered in hieroglyphics that tell the story in Piye's own words. And what's remarkable about this document is how it reveals the character of the man. Because Piye doesn't fight like a conqueror, he fights like a man on a mission from God. The Kushite army sweeps through Egypt like a righteous storm. City after city opens its gates. The people welcome him. Why? Because Piye doesn't pillage. He doesn't burn. When he takes a city, the first thing he does is go to the temple and perform the proper rituals that the Libyan warlords had abandoned. He cleanses the sanctuaries. He makes offerings. He restores proper worship. He's not destroying Egypt. He's saving it. 727 before Christ. Piye's army reaches Memphis, the ancient capital of Egypt. 5 Libyan kings have formed an alliance against him. Their combined armies dwarf his forces. This should be where the Kushite invasion ends. But Piye looks at Memphis, and he sees that the Libyans have turned the sacred city into a fortress. They've barricaded themselves inside, and Piye makes a decision that reveals everything about who he is. The Victory Stele describes it in detail. Piye sees that the Nile is high flooding, right up to the city walls. His generals suggest waiting for the water to recede. Piye refuses. He notices that the water comes right up to the walls on the north side. He orders his men to bring every boat, every ship, every vessel they can find. Then he does something nobody expects. He launches a naval assault against a landlocked city, using the flood itself as his weapon. The Kushite forces sail right up to the city walls. They scale the ramparts from the boats. Memphis falls in hours. The 5 Libyan kings flee, and when Piye enters the city, the Victory Stele records that he goes immediately to the temple of Ptah. Not to loot it, to worship. He performs the purification rituals. He makes offerings. He restores the proper ceremonies that the Libyans had corrupted. Then Piye does something that ancient conquerors simply didn't do. He pardons his enemies. When the 5 Libyan kings come to him begging for mercy, he spares their lives. He lets them keep their titles, their lands, their positions, on one condition. They must submit to him as pharaoh. They must restore proper worship. They must maintain Ma'at. The victory stele even records that Piye refused to meet with one of the surrendering kings because the man had eaten fish, which was ritually unclean. Piye had just conquered Egypt, and he's worried about religious purity laws. This isn't a barbarian invasion. This is a moral reformation led by a man who believes God called him to save Egypt from itself. And here's the detail that should be in every history book, but isn't. When Piye's forces captured the Libyan king's horses, Piye personally inspected the royal stables. The victory stele says he was furious to discover the horses had been neglected during the siege. They were underfed. Piye, who just conquered the most powerful nation on earth, stops to make sure the enemy's horses are properly cared for. Because horses are sacred. Because Ma'at extends to all living things. Because this is a man who rules by principle, not power. Piye returns to Napata, having conquered all of Egypt. The 25th dynasty has begun. The Black Pharaohs rule from Kush to the Mediterranean, and for the next 100 years, they will prove to be the most remarkable rulers Egypt has seen in 5 centuries. But Piye himself never stays in Egypt. He goes home to Kush. He's buried under a pyramid at El Kuru, and his successors will have to defend what he built. Because 700 miles to the northeast, the Assyrian Empire is watching. And Assyria doesn't care about Ma'at. Assyria cares about conquest. They've already destroyed Israel. They've already conquered Babylon. And Egypt is next on their list. The Black Pharaohs are about to face the most brutal military machine the ancient world has ever seen. Hold that thought, because what happens next proves these weren't just pharaohs. They were warriors, and the greatest of them all is about to take the throne. His name is Taharqa. He's 6 feet tall in a time when the average man is 5'4". He will rule for 26 years. He will defeat Assyria in battle. He will save Jerusalem from genocide. The Bible mentions him by name. And for the next 2,700 years, the world will try to forget he existed. 790 before Christ. A boy is born in Kush, named Taharqa. His father is Pharaoh Piye, conqueror of Egypt. His mother is Queen Abar. From birth, this child is destined for greatness. Taharqa grows up in Napata, the Kushite capital, surrounded by wealth and learning. He's trained in warfare and administration in the religious rituals that give Kushite pharaohs their legitimacy. And he grows. By the time he's 20 years old, he stands 6 feet 1 inch tall. In the ancient world where malnutrition keeps most men under 5.5 feet, Taharqa is a giant. His statues show him with distinctly African features, broad nose, full lips, the kind of face that makes it impossible to claim he was anything but black. Which is exactly why most of his statues are hidden in museum storage today. In 701, before Christ, Taharqa's uncle Shabaka dies, his cousin Shebitku takes the throne, and immediately crisis erupts, because Assyria, the superpower of the Near East, has set its sights on Egypt. The Assyrian king Sennacherib commands the largest, most advanced military force the world has ever seen. 200,000 soldiers, iron weapons when most armies still use bronze, siege engines that can tear down city walls, psychological warfare tactics that involve impaling entire populations on stakes outside conquered cities. Assyria doesn't just defeat enemies, it terrorizes them into submission. Sennacherib has already destroyed the northern kingdom of Israel. Now he's marching on Jerusalem. The southern kingdom of Judah is all that remains of God's chosen people. King Hezekiah of Judah looks at the Assyrian army surrounding his city and knows he has no chance. None. Sennacherib has conquered every nation between Assyria and Egypt. Jerusalem will fall. The Jews will be slaughtered or enslaved. The temple will be destroyed. This is the end, unless someone intervenes. The Bible records what happens next in 2 Kings chapter 19 and Isaiah chapter 37. King Hezekiah prays. He begs God for deliverance, and God sends help from an unexpected source, from Africa, from Kush. The Bible says, and I'm quoting directly, "Now Sennacherib received a report that Taharqa, the king of Kush, was marching out to fight against him." Taharqa, that's the Hebrew pronunciation of Taharqa. The Bible is talking about a black African pharaoh coming to save Jerusalem from genocide. Young Taharqa, probably in his early 20s at this point, leads a Kushite army north to confront Assyria. Now think about the courage this requires. Assyria has never lost a major battle. Never. They've conquered everyone they've faced. And Taharqa, this young prince from Kush, marches out to face them anyway. Not for territory, not for wealth. Because Judah appealed to Egypt for help. And Egypt is part of the Kushite Empire now. And Kushite pharaohs honor their commitments. The confrontation happens in 701 before Christ. Historical records are fragmentary, but we know this much. The Assyrian army retreats from Jerusalem. Sennacherib goes home. Jerusalem survives. The Jewish people survive. 2 Kings chapter 19 verse 35 says that the angel of the Lord struck down 185,000 Assyrian soldiers in a single night. Whether that's divine intervention, plague military defeat, or all three, the result is the same. Assyria, the unstoppable war machine, stopped by a black pharaoh from Africa. Taharqa returns to Kush, a hero. And in 690 before Christ, when his cousin Shebitku dies, Taharqa takes the throne. He's 30 years old. He will rule for the next 26 years. Taharqa understands that a pharaoh's power comes from three sources: military strength, economic prosperity, and divine legitimacy. He cultivates all three with brilliant strategy. On the military front, he maintains the standing army that defeated Assyria. He stations troops throughout Egypt and Kush. He builds alliances with neighboring kingdoms. He makes it clear that anyone who threatens Egyptian territory will face the full might of the Kushite military. And for the first 20 years of his reign, it works. Nobody dares challenge him. Economically, Taharqa oversees a golden age. The Nile floods reliably during his reign, which the Egyptians interpret as a sign of divine favor. Harvests are abundant. Trade flourishes. Gold flows from Kushite mines into Egyptian treasuries. Taharqa uses this wealth to launch the most ambitious building program Egypt has seen in centuries. He constructs or renovates at least 25 temples across Egypt and Kush. He builds a massive palace at Memphis with columns carved from single blocks of granite weighing 20 tons each. He erects monuments at Karnak, at Thebes, at Tanis, at Napata, at every major city in his empire. Think about what this means. Egypt had been fragmenting for 200 years before the Kushites arrived. Temples were crumbling. Infrastructure was decaying. The country was broke. Now under black African pharaohs, Egypt is building again, prospering again, functioning again. The student didn't just surpass the teacher. The student saved the teacher from collapse. And Taharqa's religious authority is unquestioned. He's not just Pharaoh. He's the chosen of Amun. He's the restorer of Ma'at. He performs the ancient rituals with meticulous precision. He makes lavish offerings to the gods. He presents himself as the perfect fusion of Kushite and Egyptian tradition. His inscriptions describe him as beloved of both Amun and Apedemak, the Kushite lion god. He's building a multicultural empire where Kushite and Egyptian identities strengthen each other instead of competing. His statues from this period show him at the height of his power. There's one in the British Museum tucked away in the storage area where most visitors never see it. It shows Taharqa with unmistakably African features. strong cheekbones, broad nose, full lips, wearing the double crown of Upper and Lower Egypt, holding the crook and flail symbols of pharaonic authority, looking every inch the king he was. The museum label says Nubian period, not 25th dynasty, not Black Pharaohs, Nubian period, like he was a temporary aberration instead of the man who saved Egypt. For 2 decades, Taharqa's Egypt is stable, prosperous, powerful. And then Assyria comes back. 674 before Christ. A new Assyrian king named Esarhaddon invades Egypt. He learned from Sennacherib's failure. This time the Assyrian army is even larger, better equipped, more ruthless. Taharqa marches out to meet them. The 2 armies clash somewhere in the eastern Nile Delta. And for the first time in his reign, Taharqa faces a military disaster. The Assyrians win. They push into Egyptian territory. They take Memphis. Taharqa has to retreat south to Thebes. But here's where Taharqa's character shows. He doesn't surrender. He doesn't flee to Kush and abandon Egypt. He regroups. He rebuilds his army. And the moment the Assyrians withdraw, which they have to, because maintaining occupation forces in Egypt is logistically impossible. Taharqa retakes Memphis. He expels the Assyrian garrison. He restores his control. Assyria just defeated him in open battle, and within a year he's reclaimed everything they took. Esarhaddon is furious. He invades again in 669 before Christ and dies during the campaign. His son Ashurbanipal takes over, and Ashurbanipal is even more brutal than his father. He brings the full weight of the Assyrian war machine down on Egypt with one goal: destroy the Kushite dynasty, end black rule over Egypt. Make an example of these African pharaohs who dared to resist Assyrian supremacy. The war drags on for years, back and forth. Taharqa holds Thebes even as the Assyrians ravage the north. He's in his 60s now. He's been fighting Assyria for a decade, and in 664 before Christ, Taharqa dies. He's buried under a pyramid at Nuri in Sudan. His pyramid still stands today, 52 feet tall, built from sandstone blocks fitted together with mathematical precision. Inside his burial chamber contains inscriptions praising his devotion to the gods, his military victories, his building projects. Everything a pharaoh's tomb should contain. But for 2,600 years, almost nobody knew it existed. Taharqa's nephew Tantamani takes the throne, and immediately disaster strikes. Ashurbanipal invades with overwhelming force. Tantamani fights valiantly, but he's outnumbered 5-1. The Assyrians push deep into Egypt. They reach Thebes, and in 663 before Christ, they do the unthinkable. They sack Thebes. Thebes, the city that had stood inviolate for over 1,000 years, the religious capital of Egypt, the city of Amun. The Assyrians loot every temple. They burn the royal palaces. They carry away 2 tons of gold and silver. They demolish monuments. The Greek historian Herodotus later writes that the destruction of Thebes was so complete, so shocking, that it traumatized the entire ancient world. It would be like watching Rome burn, or Jerusalem fall. Thebes was eternal, and now it was ashes. Tantamani retreats to Kush. He never sets foot in Egypt again. The 25th dynasty's rule over Egypt is over. They held it for less than a century. 73 years of black pharaohs on the throne of the world's greatest civilization. And now it's done. The Kushite pharaohs withdraw south of Aswan. They maintain their kingdom in Kush for another 900 years, but they never rule Egypt again. And within a generation, Egypt itself will fall to Persia. The age of the pharaohs is ending, and the final Egyptian pharaohs worthy of the title were black. But here's what your history books don't tell you. Kush didn't collapse when they lost Egypt. They thrived. They moved their capital south to Meroe, away from Assyrian reach. They developed their own unique script, called Meroitic, that scholars still haven't fully deciphered. They became the iron-smelting capital of Africa, producing more iron than anyone else on the continent. They built another 150 pyramids in Meroe and the surrounding areas. Smaller than Egyptian pyramids, but more numerous. Kush ended up with 180 pyramids total, compared to Egypt's 138. More pyramids, in Africa, built by black Africans, and almost nobody knows about them. Kush traded with Rome, with India, with Arabia, with the entire known world. They were wealthy, powerful, independent. They lasted until 350 after Christ, when the kingdom of Aksum from Ethiopia finally conquered them. That's over 1,000 years after they lost Egypt. 1,000 years of civilization culture achievement, and it's not in your textbooks. It's not in your museums. It's not in Hollywood movies. Why? Because acknowledging Kush means acknowledging that black Africans built one of the most successful civilizations in human history, and that shatters the narrative that justified slavery colonization and every racist policy that followed. They had to erase Kush. They had to turn the black pharaohs into Nubians, a word that sounds exotic and vague instead of powerful and specific. They had to hide the statues with African features. They had to ignore the pyramids in Sudan. They had to pretend that when the Bible mentions the king of Kush saving Jerusalem, it's talking about some minor, irrelevant kingdom instead of a superpower that ruled Egypt. Because if they admitted the truth, if they taught children that black Africans were pharaohs, that changes everything. It destroys the foundation of white supremacy. It proves that African civilization predates European civilization. It demonstrates that blackness and greatness are not contradictory, but synonymous. And that's exactly why they buried this history. That's exactly why you're just learning it now. That's exactly why we need to talk about the pattern. Because Kush isn't the only African empire they erased. There's a system here, a method. And once you see it, you'll recognize it everywhere. You'll see how they use the exact same playbook to erase Great Zimbabwe, to erase the Mali Empire, to erase Aksum, to erase every piece of evidence that black Africa was the birthplace of human civilization. But before we get to that pattern, before I show you how they've been doing this for centuries, you need to understand something. This video is already challenging everything you learned in school, and it's about to get more shocking. Because the evidence of this erasure isn't hidden in dusty archives. It's happening right now. In museums you can visit today. In textbooks your children are reading. In casting decisions for movies released this year. The same people who buried Kush's history are still working to keep it buried. And if we don't expose them, if we don't share this truth, they'll succeed for another generation. So right now, if this truth is hitting you like a freight train, if you're angry that nobody taught you this, if you're ready to stop letting them control the narrative, do something about it. Comment Pharaoh below. Hit that like button like you're claiming your inheritance. Share this video with someone who needs to know they descend from kings. Because this isn't just history, this is identity, this is power, this is the truth they stole from you. And we're taking it back. Now let's talk about the pattern. Because what happened to Kush happened to every great African civilization. Same methods, same lies, same erasure. And when you see it laid out, when you see how deliberate this was, you'll never trust a history book again. 1100 after Christ, Southern Africa. The Kingdom of Zimbabwe is rising. And I don't mean modern Zimbabwe, the country. I mean the actual city-state called Great Zimbabwe. The name means houses of stone in the Shona language. And these aren't huts. These aren't villages. This is architecture that would make Rome jealous. The walls of Great Zimbabwe are 36 feet high in some places, 11 feet thick at the base, built from granite blocks cut so precisely they fit together without mortar. Not a drop of cement, not a smear of mud, just stone on stone fitted so perfectly that a knife blade can't slip between them. The Great Enclosure, the largest single ancient structure south of the Sahara, has walls that run 800 feet in a curve. The brickwork is so sophisticated it includes decorative chevron patterns. This isn't primitive construction. This is engineering that requires mathematics, planning generational knowledge. At its peak, Great Zimbabwe is home to 18,000 people. The city controls the gold trade routes between the interior of Africa and the Indian Ocean coast. Zimbabwe exports gold to China, India, Persia, Arabia. Archaeologists have found Chinese pottery, Persian glass, and Arabian coins in the ruins. This is an international trading hub, a sophisticated urban center, a wealthy, powerful kingdom built by Black Africans 600 years before Europeans arrive on the continent. And when Europeans finally do arrive, when they see these ruins, they can't handle it. Their entire worldview shatters, because they've spent centuries telling themselves that Africans are primitive, that Black people are intellectually inferior, that civilization came from Europe and spread outward to enlighten the savages. And here's architectural proof that Africans were building cities more advanced than medieval Europe at the same time. So they lie. 1871. A German explorer named Karl Mauch reaches Great Zimbabwe. He sees the ruins. He sees the precision stonework. He sees the evidence of a sophisticated culture. And he immediately decides it can't be African. He writes in his journal, and I'm quoting, "The ruins and the people who build them are not and cannot be African." He decides with zero evidence that Great Zimbabwe must have been built by Phoenicians, or maybe King Solomon's builders, or possibly the Queen of Sheba, anyone but Black Africans. Other Europeans pick up this narrative and run with it. The ruins become proof of ancient Phoenician colonies in Africa, or evidence of King Solomon's mines. Books are published, academic papers circulate, museums create exhibits, and the message is always the same. These remarkable ruins couldn't possibly be the work of Black Africans. Some external civilization must have built them, and that external civilization is conveniently always lighter-skinned, always from the Mediterranean or Middle East, never from Africa itself. The racism is so blatant, it's cartoonish, but it works. For 100 years, the official position of European archaeology is that Great Zimbabwe was built by non-Africans. The Rhodesian government, the white minority regime controlling the territory, enforces this narrative legally. They ban archaeologists from publishing findings that suggest African origins. They literally make it illegal to tell the truth. Books are censored. Academic papers are suppressed. Teachers who try to teach the African origins of Great Zimbabwe are fired. And this continues until 1980, when Zimbabwe gains independence. When the Black majority finally controls their own country and can tell their own history, only then, after a century of lies, does the truth become official. Great Zimbabwe was built by the Shona people, Black Africans, using their own architectural traditions, with no outside help. It always was. Every honest archaeologist knew it, but colonialism required the lie, so the lie became history. Do you see the pattern now? When they find evidence of African greatness, they can't deny the physical evidence. The ruins exist, the walls are standing, the artifacts are there. So instead they deny that Africans built it. They attribute it to someone else, anyone else. Phoenicians, Arabs, lost tribes of Israel, even aliens when the alternatives run out. Because admitting that Black Africans built Great Zimbabwe means admitting that racist theories of African inferiority are lies. And they can't admit that because it undermines everything: slavery, colonization, segregation. All of it rests on the premise that Africans are inferior, that they contribute nothing to civilization, that white Europeans had to civilize them. Great Zimbabwe destroys that premise, so Great Zimbabwe must be explained away. The same thing happens in West Africa, same time period. The Mali Empire is rising to become one of the wealthiest, most powerful nations on earth. And I mean that literally. One of the wealthiest nations on earth. Not for its time. On earth. Period. 1200 after Christ. The Mali Empire controls the gold and salt trade routes across the Sahara. Their territory stretches from the Atlantic Ocean to modern-day Niger. They rule over 400,000 square miles, millions of people, and they're rich beyond imagination. The Malian city of Timbuktu becomes a center of Islamic learning. The Sankore University in Timbuktu has 25,000 students. Compare that to the University of Oxford, which has maybe 4,000 students at the same time. Timbuktu has 3 times as many students. The city has 180 Quranic schools, private libraries holding hundreds of thousands of manuscripts on astronomy, mathematics, medicine, law, history, theology. This is one of the great intellectual centers of the medieval world in Africa, run by Black Africans, and the wealth. The wealth is staggering. In 1324, the Malian emperor Mansa Musa makes a pilgrimage to Mecca. He brings 60,000 attendants, 80 camels, each camel carrying 300 pounds of gold. That's 24,000 pounds of gold just in the caravan. Mansa Musa gives away so much gold during his pilgrimage that he crashes the gold market across North Africa and the Middle East. The price of gold drops by 25% because one man is so wealthy, he destabilizes the entire regional economy just by being generous. Modern economists estimate Mansa Musa's wealth at $400 billion in today's money, making him the richest person in human history. And he's a Black African Muslim, ruling a Black African empire. Contemporary Arab historians write about Mali with awe. They describe the emperor's wealth, the sophistication of the cities, the learning centers, the trade networks. European merchants who visit Mali report the same things. There are eyewitness accounts, primary sources, documentation. This isn't speculation, this is recorded history. The Mali Empire was one of the great powers of the medieval world, and everyone who encountered it knew it. So how does this empire disappear from history? Same playbook as Great Zimbabwe. When Western textbooks finally acknowledge Mali exists, they attribute its success to Arab influence. They say Islam brought civilization to West Africa. They say Arab traders created the wealth. They downplay or ignore the fact that Mali was built and ruled by Black Africans, that the legendary wealth came from African gold mines worked by African laborers overseen by African kings, that Timbuktu's libraries were filled with manuscripts written by African scholars in Arabic, yes, but also in local African languages, that the architectural achievements, the political systems, the economic networks were all African innovations. Instead, the narrative becomes that Arabs civilized West Africa, that Islam elevated primitive tribes into something resembling civilization, that any achievements during this period should be credited to outside influence rather than African agency. It's Great Zimbabwe all over again. Acknowledge the evidence because you can't deny it exists, but attribute it to someone else. Strip Africans of credit for their own achievements. Make sure the story always has a non-African savior figure who brings civilization to the backwards natives. And when the evidence becomes too overwhelming to deny, when even that narrative starts to crack, they just stop teaching it. How many Americans know about the Mali Empire? How many can name Mansa Musa? How many learned about Timbuktu as a center of learning instead of a punchline, meaning the middle of nowhere? They took the richest man in human history, a black African Muslim emperor, and erased him from popular consciousness so thoroughly that most people have never heard his name. Let me show you one more example, and then you'll see this pattern is everywhere. The Kingdom of Aksum in Ethiopia. 100 after Christ to 940 after Christ. Aksum controls the Red Sea trade routes. They're trading with Rome, with India, with Persia, with the entire ancient world. They're wealthy and powerful enough that they conquer parts of the Arabian Peninsula. That's right, an African kingdom conquering Arab territory, not the other way around. Aksum's emperor Caleb conquers Yemen in 525 after Christ and rules it for 50 years. African emperors ruling Arabian cities. Think about how that inverts every stereotype you've been taught. Aksum is also one of the first Christian nations on earth. They convert in 330 after Christ under Emperor Ezana. That's before the Roman Empire officially converts. Before most of Europe converts. Ethiopia has been Christian for 1700 years, longer than England, longer than France, longer than Germany. They have their own ancient church traditions, their own religious texts. The Ethiopian Bible contains 81 books compared to 66 in the Protestant Bible. They claim to possess the Ark of the Covenant in a church in Aksum guarded day and night by a single monk who never leaves. Whether that's true or not, the point is, Ethiopia has one of the oldest continuous Christian traditions in the world, and it's entirely African. Aksum builds massive stone obelisks, some over 100 feet tall, carved from single pieces of granite. They developed their own alphabet Ge'ez, which is still used in the Ethiopian Orthodox Church today. They mint their own coins with Greek and Ge'ez inscriptions, showing their integration into both African and Mediterranean trade networks. This is a sophisticated, literate Christian African civilization, contemporary with Rome, outlasting Rome, continuing for centuries after Rome falls. And how do Western histories handle Aksum? They call it a Middle Eastern civilization. They emphasize its ties to Arabia and downplay its African identity. They treat Ethiopian Christianity as somehow separate from African Christianity, as if Ethiopia isn't in Africa. They ignore Aksum's conquests and focus only on periods when Aksum was conquered. They minimize its achievements and maximize its connections to non-African cultures. Same pattern, same erasure, same denial of African agency and achievement. Do you see it now? This isn't isolated. This isn't accidental. This is systematic. Every time Africans build something great, Europeans either deny that Africans built it, attribute it to outside influence, or just stop teaching it entirely. Great Zimbabwe Phoenicians built it. Mali Arabs civilized it. Aksum. That's basically Middle Eastern. Kush. Let's call them Nubians and hide their pharaohs in museum storage and never mention that they ruled Egypt. The pattern is consistent because the goal is consistent. Maintain the narrative that Africans are inherently inferior, that they contribute nothing to world civilization, that everything valuable in Africa came from outside. That justifies slavery, because you're not enslaving civilized people, you're enslaving primitives. That justifies colonization, because you're not conquering sophisticated kingdoms, you're bringing civilization to savages. That justifies every racist policy that follows, because if Africans never built anything, never achieved anything, never contributed anything, then treating them as inferior is just acknowledging reality. Except, it's all lies, every word of it, and the proof is in the ruins they can't destroy. In the manuscripts they can't burn, In the DNA evidence, they can fake. In the historical records written by Arabs and Europeans who visited these kingdoms and documented their greatness before the narrative shifted. The evidence exists. It's always existed. They just buried it, hid it, lied about it, erased it from textbooks and museums and popular consciousness, made sure that generation after generation of people, black and white, grew up never knowing that African civilizations rivaled or surpassed anything Europe built. And it's still happening, right now, today. Let me show you how the erasure continues in the 21st century.